hour 2 on the Sports Fix. Let's talk about the Carolina Panthers because they're showing up to win a game and try to win a playoff spot this weekend against the Browns. Jeff Gorman scouted them. He's here. You keep the conversation going. Facebook.com/thesportsfix. Tweet with us at thesportsfixCLE. I'm going over the mountain to Jeff Gorman, Browns101.com. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great, J-Rock. I think the best thing that came out of that entire debate was the discovery of your new wrestling gimmick, the guy who will not lay down for anybody.
Hush your mouth, man.
Hey, word for Shawn Michaels.
Listen, LG had the right point, but he literally picked the wrong sport sports entertainment to do it because I could not honestly answer that question. When he said that, I laughed. I just said, "Ooh, of anything else you could have, I've never laid down in radio, but wrong sports." But anyways, I got a kick out of that. But anyways, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, getting ready for Christmas and everything, and it's all slowly coming together.
Slowly coming together, kind of like the Browns season. Slowly coming together here, blurbing into an off season and then another season still to come. But there's 2 games left to play. You've been listening to the show. Talk to me a bit about what we talked about so far. And hold on a second, LG. First off, don't use the F word, my friend, when we're talking about professional wrestling. But LG in the chat room said now people will think that wrestling is not on the up and up. Listen, I hate to break it to you, but I may have. I feel bad. I feel like I may have just screwed up Santa Claus for some kids out there. But for those of you listening to the Sports Fix, there has been a time or two that I have gone into the squared circle fully aware of what the final determination was going to be. I hate to say it, but there has been a time or two that I have been aware of where things were going, and I can't lie. I may have been paid to take a dive or 2 over the years. That's all I'm going to say. Now, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys, if you're heartbroken with me now. Yes, it's true. Little kids everywhere ripping off their T-shirts and throwing them down and say it ain't so, J-Rock. Say it ain't so. But, yeah, there's been times that I've been desperate and down on my luck, and I said, you know what? I'll take a dive. And I took the cash, and I laid down. I feel terrible. LG broke me live on the radio.
Well, now I can only hope that no one ever comes and asks me, Jeff, have you ever announced a wrestling show where not only were the matches written down in front of you, but who's going to win and who's going to lose? I just hope nobody can ever ask me that because I can't bring myself to give them the correct answer to that question.
Jeff, it's like Blue Chips. I feel like I'm talking to you now. Coach, you didn't even know it, but you coached a fixed game. Jeff, you may have called a fixed game or 2. I'm just going to break it to you now. You may have been an unwilling participant in some chicanery going on, brother.
Shocked I am.
We're killing people. See, we're killing Santa Claus for people all over right now. Come on, pull the curtain back down. Let's talk a little bit about the Browns. As I was saying before we went off on that ridiculous tangent, I told you guys, I'm wearing pajamas today. This is we're closing the school for Christmas Day. We're having some fun. Where are you at with what I've been saying? I mean, you know where I am. You and I have different feelings about Manziel. I think you are higher on his upside than I am. But either way, I mean, you see where I'm coming from, and you see how the conversation so easily barrels down into sticking points and people's arguments and stuff. It's so hard to try to keep the big picture. But I mean, the realities are that, you know, when the narrative is that the ownership drove this thing, the ownership is not walking away from it. So you have to look at these next 2 weeks, and you can't go, well, let's get to the offseason so they can kick Manziel to the curb. That's not happening no matter what happens for the next 2 weeks.
Right. You know, even if he really falls flat on his face in the next 2 games, there's no reason to get rid of him, especially if the owner is in love with him. You know, there's nothing wrong with him just sitting the bench even for the next 2 years. You know, you can always throw him out as a kick returner. You can always put him in some kind of little gimmicky wildcat type of packages and stuff. If you really don't think that he can be a real quarterback, there's a few other little things you can do with him.
If he's too small to play quarterback, how are you going to put him back there to return? I can't believe you said kick returner. No,
well,
but I hear you.
Metcalf wasn't a big guy. He was a great kick returner.
No, I know. And that's funny. You're like finding a way to use that. It sounds like Tim Tebow. Wow. Do you guys remember having that conversation? Well, if Tim Tebow would just play fullback, he'd still be in the NFL, you know? So I'm just saying. I think people still say that, but I know where you're going with that. I mean, yeah, the thing that I'm talking about, what you said really is, you said kick returner. I didn't go that far, but that's what you determine if you're the Browns. You're not determining if he's going to be on the team next year. He's going to. You're determining how much of your team you're putting into this kid's hands. Is he going to sit another season? I mean, if he does, that is what a bad final 2 games will do for Manziel. If let's just go worst case, if all 3 games are what we just saw, then you will have the Browns going, okay, maybe we decide we want to develop this kid for another year or 2, but it's exactly what we just said. Developmental quarterback. We cannot go 2 or 3 seasons with what may happen with this. And if that's the case, then they'll have to alter their plans because there will need to be a plan A at quarterback. If he does well for the next 2 weeks, then he can be your plan A next season, and you live with the growing pains. So there is a lot to be determined. It's just not his spot on the roster because he's going to be here one way or the other. It's how big of an impact does he have on that roster?
That's right. He's not going to leave the team. In fact, if he sits for the next 2 years and suddenly they put him in year 4 and he's got it all together and he can run and he can pass and it works out great, and then fine. I know we're very impatient, but I don't mind if he sits for 2 more years if he ends up being a pretty good, if not great quarterback in 2018 or so. It's just that people get really, really impatient with quarterbacks, where in the past they had a long time to, get to learn the system and to really grow into the job, because that's really back when a lot of teams, kept the same quarterback for year after year, whether they were good or whether they were bad. You knew when you were a kid, you watched this team, you knew who was going to be the quarterback. You knew that Ken Stabler was going to be the quarterback of the Oakland Raiders. You knew Dan Pastorini was going to be the quarterback of the Houston Oilers, even if he wasn't always that great. They just kept that job for such a long time, and it was just a real slow growth into that spot. People were not expected to come right out of college and just set the world on fire. And again, it's people like Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson who really spoiled all of us for that. They're really the exception, and they're not the rule.
Yeah, and it tweaks people's expectations and all of that stuff. And you're right. But, hey, it's the cycle of life here in Cleveland, man. And you know what, though? Speaking of those style of court, I want to switch over because I think the opponent on the other side, while we've got Manziel out in the discussion and we're talking about growth with young quarterbacks, we've seen them do well, especially the mobile-type quarterback, and we've seen the league catch up to them, whether it's Cam, whether it's RG3, all of those guys. I mean, to me, the difference is Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson is a quarterback that's athletic as hell and can run. You know what I mean? Like, to me, there's a complete difference in their styles. But regardless, I mean, we saw the league. We've seen Cam. We've seen RG3. These guys have exploded on the scene. Then the league caught up to them, and we've seen them have their struggles and then have to bounce back from that as well. So, but with them, you see the plus and the minus that comes with this type of quarterback. But when I look at Newton, and you and I talking about him and being able to come back, I mentioned earlier about the car wreck and just being able to come back 10 days later and play some football. You look at the physical skill set. That's one of the differences. When I look at the, again, people say it's not fair to talk about Manziel's size, but there's a reason that people have measuring sticks at the combine and they do look at your size, because look at the difference between those guys we named, and then obviously not Russell Wilson, but I'm talking about the other two, the bigger guys. And you look at Cam specifically this week, there's a difference, and that's part of the ability to take the punishment that comes with that style, but it's also being bigger, changes your line of sight from behind the pocket and being able to pass. It changes a lot of different things physically about being able to work that style on the NFL level. Cam's a good example of the differences between a smaller guy and a bigger quarterback running that mobile style.
Right, and we've seen that even someone like Cam Newton has had his growing pains. Sometimes he comes off really well, and he's had times when he really, had a real crisis of confidence and everything was going wrong. And, they eventually stuck with him, and he was able to bounce back. But personally, I'm really surprised that they're letting him play. I know he says he feels good, but, this guy broke his back less than 2 weeks ago, and he's out there playing in the NFL. We talk about, how much punishment running backs take and how they talk about, it's like being in a car crash and stuff. Cam Newton really was in a car crash, and they're putting him right back in here. And I know they're hanging their hopes on these playoff hopes of theirs, which are strangely enough still alive. But I just think from a human being standpoint, I'm not a doctor, but I just don't think it's a good idea to put him in this game, no matter how well he says he feels. I think he could possibly be seriously hurt, if not this week, but maybe next week against the Falcons. I just don't think it's worth exposing your absolute franchise quarterback to that kind of risk physically.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some questions down there about it. I'd love to hear a slice of their sports talk. Wonder how many people are having those conversations coming into it. But you know what, brother? It's all hands on deck. It is playoff push, But you are right. And again, we remember with Romo a few weeks back when they were flying overseas and stuff. It was basically pain tolerance, and that was what they said with Romo. And everybody's different. How they react to it and all of that is differently. But with him, it was a matter of it was nothing that would affect him and make him play any better or worse in either direction. But I do think it affects Cam Newton more because he's a different style. He's not going to stand in the pocket. He's not going to, Tony Romo is a bit more stationary than Cam Newton is. So, and you did have a capable backup there, Derek Anderson, who for the first part of this week I thought was going to get the start for sure against his former team. He's already led them to a couple of victories here this season, and I've always had a thing. I like Derek Anderson, thought he was a very capable quarterback. His couple of starts here, he's 67% completion percentage, 700 yards, 5 TDs, no picks for Derek Anderson in his appearances. So it's not like there would have been a huge drop-off had they had to go with the backup.
That's right, although you have to remember both of those games were against Tampa Bay. It was the most recent game, and then the very first game when Newton was recovering from a rib injury. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers aren't an NFL team, but he did beat up the Buccaneers both times, Derek Anderson did. And I'd like to think that the Browns would put up a little bit more resistance if good old D.A. ends up being behind center.
And that's going to be, we're talking like it's a foregone conclusion. There is no a exact statement yet. I know Ron Rivera has not come out point blank and said that he's going to start because there can be a setback. So I'm sure that'll be a game time thing. And I'm sure they want it that way anyway because coaches love to have multiple things in the mind of the opposition. And there is a different skill set, obviously, that need to be said, that comes with Derek Anderson and Cam Newton. So having the defensive coordinator preparing for both guys is just a little added advantage for the Panthers heading into this.
You're right. This might be a little bit of a smokescreen somewhat because, they just announced just a few moments ago that he's listed as probable. So a lot of people are thinking, probable means he's probably going to play. And he's been taking most of the first team reps this week. But, they very well might think that discretion is the better part of valor and, get the Browns all hyped up in order to how are we going to stop Cam Newton running around here, running around there. And then on Sunday morning, they might say, you know what, let's keep Newton safe, maybe throw him in a little bit here and there, but let's go with Derek Anderson. He has, like you said, Anderson has proven that he can win a couple games, so he's not the worst option that the Panthers could possibly throw out there.
I'll tell you what, I'm just going to troll some Browns fans right now with this one, but when you've got the whole stat sheet in front of you and you look at the body of work for all the talk about Cam Newton, and I like Cam Newton, he's all right, but statistically, Brian Hoyer's had a better season than Cam Newton has in a lot of different categories, man. But anyway, I'm just saying, for those of you guys that want to talk about, anyways, but I could do that a lot, but nobody wants to hear that because when Brian Hoyer quarterbacks, it's him, he ruins everything, and nobody backs the truck up for the excuses. But that being said, I'm just looking, and I'm like, get out of here, man. That's amazing, man. People, there's a quarterback for you. Well, you know what? There's one for you, too. But that's that is what it is. I'm just joking when I say that here. But let's talk a little bit. Let's get serious, and let's get into this game here. Talk to me about what you found out fleshing out the Carolina Panthers this week.
Well, despite the Panthers' 5-8-1 record, they do have some pretty dangerous weapons. And, they've always been built upon the running game with D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. And Williams has been hurt. He hurt his hand. I think he broke his hand, actually. So he's been out the last couple games, but, Stewart has picked right up. He's done very well. He's run for more than 100 yards. Actually, he's run for 200 yards in the last 2 games. And so he's the guy that the Browns are going to really have to stop.